Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and I'm going to be talking along here with Mustapha Price, our producer, and this is episode 132, where we're going to be talking about how to provide value to your communities and beyond. Now, finding ways to provide value to communities can be a challenge, especially when your attention and focus is more around the development of your game or studio. While this is important, looking outward and providing value to other communities can provide valuable insight and opportunities you may never thought possible. So today, Mustapha and I will be discussing different types of communities that devs can help enrich while building their integrity and authority of their brand. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey everybody, and we're back, and I have Mustapha here with me. Mustapha, how's it going, buddy?
I'm doing fine. How about yourself?
I am doing great. The weather is finally beautiful. I mean, usually it's beautiful, but at least for us, anyways, the temperature has dropped quite a bit, where it's comfortable.
Finally.
Yeah, that was not fun. So consistently for a while, like the grass around here, at least in my area, has been consistently brown, not green. And we've been on a streak of like 90, 95. Mm-hmm. Feels like I'm in Arizona.
Yeah.
Plus humidity. But anyways, so we're doing well. And, before we get into our discussion today, which I think is a really good one, I just wanted to find out from you, Mustapha, what's been going on in your world and such.
Yeah, so, I talked last time about how I was working on some stuff with my team. That's still going strong. But on the gaming front, I said I try to finish 5 new games or 5 games I've never completed before once a year. And I believe it was last week or the week before I finally finished that up. So I've done my 5 new games. I finished off with Guacamelee 2, nice. Which is an indie game, Drinkbox Studios. Absolutely fantastic. One of the better games I've played this year for sure. And now, just like everybody else under the sun, I am all aboard the Fall Guys train. The game is absolutely hilarious. It is everything I love in a party game. And I don't usually like very physics-based games, but I mean it's like Wipeout meets platformer meets Mario Party, so it's really everything I could have ever wanted.
Yeah, no, that definitely sounds like it was made for you. So I'm glad you're enjoying it. Yeah, I mean on my end, not too much new, just keeping busy with client projects and things like that. But one thing I have to call out on, and that I've been loving is binged on some Umbrella Academy Season 2 on Netflix. When it's funny, I remember Season 1 a while back, and how I found out about it was just all these random ads like talking about a dysfunctional family. I'm like, what is this? This seems so weird. But somehow they got my attention with the ads. I think it might have been the costumes and the colors they were using. I don't know, but I clicked on it. I was like, this looks neat. I'll check it out. Fell in love with Season 1. Season 2 was just as good. And made me want to go back to Season 1. But it was really funny because within the first 5 minutes of the opening of Episode 1, Season 2, I paused it, called up my local comic book store, and was like, can you order me Umbrella Academy Volume 1, a graphic novel? And so finally got that in, and I started to read that. And what I love about that is I was expecting a little bit of the same. I don't read too many graphic novels, but I have read a few in general. And what I loved about it was how different it was. So right now I'm going through this graphic novel, and it feels like it's a completely different show in a good way. Like I'm learning a little bit more. So now I just want to go back to Season 1 and rewatch that. But I am absolutely loving this graphic novel, and it's just doing some really awesome things that I'm not even going to go into detail because I could probably spend the whole entire show just talking about it. And I haven't even finished it yet because I literally just picked it up yesterday. So if anybody was a fan of the show, then I would at least highly consider looking and maybe checking that out and picking up that series. There's 3 in the series themselves. And it's a lot of fun. So. All right, cool. So should we get into our discussion for today?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So today we are going to be talking about how to provide value to your communities and beyond. And the way we're looking at this too is we thought, like, based off of our last episode where we were talking about really how to serve and with the right intent to your audience, right? We thought it would be good to maybe kind of play off of that idea a little bit, but go into a little bit further. And in terms of, like I said, providing value to your communities, because there's a lot that can be said there. And I know we talked about community development and everything, and we're actually thinking of this in a much broader, I would say, fulfilling perspective, opposed to just like, oh, your immediate game community and how do you provide value to those fans and everything else. And yes, that's obviously still important, but we're looking at this from a much broader perspective or outwardly in terms of what can you really get out of serving others, basically, and not just relating to your game, to your marketing and everything else like that. And we'll get into it in a minute in terms of how this all relates and how it can be beneficial on various skills. So to kick this discussion off, I let's just put it out there, Mustapha, in terms of like, how important do you think it is to provide value to communities outside of your own? Because some people might think that it's not really that important to them, but like, let's say, like, what are some things to consider and some reasons why you would want to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. So one example I have, and when I think of what we're saying here, I think like community outside of your own, what I'd be referring to is really beyond just your game community. Like right. I'm thinking, even into like your local community. And of course, maybe this isn't quite as true of indie devs, but I grew up in Rhode Island, so that's where I attended school. And I remember they had a company that kind of a game company. It was a AAA team, but they moved in locally, under the promise of like jobs and things like that. And of course, there were a plethora of issues, mismanagement, among other things, that led the company to collapse. And it actually was quite damaging to the local economy of the city, like to the point where it's something that's still being repaired now, some odd like 8 years later. Wow. Now, on the opposite end of that, when you look at like the positive that local communities can provide, or game devs can provide to their local community, rather, I'd say it's among the most important things. The industry as a whole, even though it feels like it's been around a long time, is still very much in its infancy. And so the way that it continues to grow is, I think, by service of having the same kind of positive image that a lot of other industries have. That includes things like being charitable, engaging with people, offering educational opportunities, all things we'll go into greater detail on further down the line. But, games like anywhere else, we're part of whatever unit we decide to place ourselves in. So pulling our weight, I think, is essential.
Yeah, it's a good point that you mentioned there, too, in terms of like how that one example, how that game dev or like the AAA studio was in a very local sense, providing jobs and as one example too. And, I really like that one too, even though it was, an unfortunate instance where it just didn't work out. And I think what's also important too is when let's say this is something that has been on devs' minds or a studio's mind where like, yeah, I kind of want to do this. And maybe some of the reason is like, let's say you're already at a good point you're becoming sustainable and things along those lines. But you're finding that even though you're making this dream of yours work, it might not be hitting on all those fulfilling points, and you're really trying to explore what else can be done. And I think that's why this is really a good question to ask and looking to providing value to communities. And I think an important question that people need to really ask themselves or their company is like, what aligns with you and your values? Because what important value, like what values are important to you, and how does that all work out? Because if you're doing this for, let's say, other reasons, I think it's not necessarily going to come out genuine, right? That's important. And just to even go back in a very simplistic example of this, just from a personal one of mine was, and this doesn't relate to anything I do business-wise or anything else, but it's more of a fulfilling thing where I was decided to do a bike ride because like a charitable bike ride. A friend of mine was like kind of pushing me to get into it, and then I was like, and we were signing up for I think 50 miles, and that seemed like a huge personal accomplishment for me to bike 50 miles in one race. So that was good, but of course the cause was really good because here we are, all the money earned, and I was joining a community of other bikers. Of course, all the money that we earned went to a food bank. So there's a lot of good that came out of that too and everything. But from a personal fulfillment side of it, I was able to succeed at, hitting that 50-mile mark on my bike, which took a lot of work and energy. So that in itself is fulfilling. But another example I want to provide, which you were kind of saying too, like how this industry in itself is very much young. And ours is, in a lot of ways, when I say ours, because we're based in the United States, is still probably maybe a little bit more mature than other industries, other indie game industries in other countries. And this is actually an interesting conversation I had with one of our listeners. And what we were talking about that, he's in a country where the industry is very, very new. And because it's emerging and everything, but there's instances where because it's so new, they don't necessarily have a strong and supportive community yet. And it's not to say that the community isn't strong or supportive. What it's more of saying is they don't have authoritative figures in this space, and they're really looking to each other or whoever they really believe in is providing like really good value, and they're really looking up to those people. But the problem that happens is some of those people, even if they have complete, honest, well-serving intent, they just don't know everything yet. And what happens is there's kind of like a bit of misinformation, if you will, going around, and people aren't necessarily getting the support they need to really thrive and grow as a community. But like when you really look out at those values and everything, and you're in a position where you have the experience and the knowledge and something you can show, you can really rise to the occasion and provide value to this to these types of communities that are really just beginning to grow and emerge. And that way, it's just going to help everybody out. You'll be serving as an authoritative figure, and everybody else will be looking up to you on those things. So, yeah. So I know I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but that's another way to look at it. Like, there's lots of ways that these opportunities are out there, and also looking at that question too: what aligns with you and your values, and not just you personally, but also with your brand, with your company. Where do those values align? And Mustapha, what do you think is another area too that you should really consider? Because let's say, hey, I'm listening right now. I do want to provide more value to my community and my greater communities. But what's another thing I should really consider when it comes to seeing if I want to go ahead and do this?
Right. Yeah. I mean, resources are everything.
Yeah.
So even if it's something that maybe you have the intent to do you have the time? Do you have the manpower, so to speak? Like what tools are available at your disposal to make to make good on these sort of aspirations? So for instance, if you would like to, say, set up like a charity drive donation